Okay, so I think Marvel basically just told us how Avengers Doomsday is going to end. Not in an interview, not in some leak, in a single background prop that was on screen for like 2 seconds. And almost nobody caught it. Stick with me here because by the end of this, you're going to know why Doctor Doom is really coming, who he's really coming for, and I don't think it is what you think it is. There's a wide shot inside the renovated Avengers Tower in the new trailer that's just sitting there in the background. There's 3 connected globes. That's not set dressing, that is the plot. And I'm going to come back to that, I promise. But here's what I'm going to get into first. What the trailer's hiding in plain sight, what that background shot actually means, who Steve Rogers even is right now, because I don't think it's who you think it is, and why Doom might be coming for the one specific person for reasons that are way more personal than anybody's really explained yet. All right, let's start with the stuff that I think most people scrolled past. There's a detail buried in this trailer nobody's talking about. When Thor's carrying Mjolnir towards Steve Rogers at the end, the hammer's got a visible crack in it. That's not nothing. Mjolnir's already been destroyed once by Hela back in Ragnarok, and Thor's been carrying a rebuilt version ever since. So either this is foreshadowing that the hammer's about to break again under whatever Doom's about to unleash, or it's proof Doom's already gotten close enough to damage it. Which, come on, how strong do you have to be to crack an Asgardian forged weapon? Keep an eye on that hammer. I don't think it makes it to the credits in one piece. Now, second thing, this is Doom's actual first appearance in the real MCU. We all know that. This is the very first time ever in any live-action version of this guy, including the Fox Fantastic Four movies back in 2005, 2007, 2015. Doctor Doom actually sounds like Doctor Doom. Downey gives him this Eastern European accent, and that is a straight nod to Victor Von Doom's comic origin as the ruler of Latveria, this functional Eastern European nation he's run with an iron fist for decades. In the comics, Doom isn't just powerful, he's regal, he's arrogant, completely convinced he's right about everything, and giving him an accent tied to an actual country he rules gives Downey something real to build that arrogance on. Every version before this stripped that out. This is Marvel finally course correcting and doing it in his very first MCU appearance. If they got the voice this right, maybe the writing actually matches. Time will tell on that one. Anyone catch Namor's suit? Namor if you're nasty. He's in the black bodysuit with blue scale accents. That's like a direct callback to the moisture suit from Submariner number 67 way back in 1973. A suit that's supposed to keep him hydrated when he's away from the water for a while. That is a deep cut for a guy who's usually just shirtless with pointy ears and ankle wings. So if they're bothering to explain how he survives on land long term, does that mean he's out of Talokan for a good chunk of this movie? Maybe fighting alongside the Avengers for a real stretch instead of just showing up for a cameo? We are going to watch his screen time very closely. I don't think it's a one scene thing. And then the moment you've all been waiting for, when Doom's going toe to toe with Thor, he's not alone. He's surrounded by Sentinels. And if that name doesn't mean anything to you, it should, because Sentinels are the X-Men's worst nightmare. Giant robot hunters built to find and wipe out mutants. That's not just some random army Doom threw together. That's Marvel handing him the exact weapon the X-Men have been terrified of for decades. So this isn't just Doom versus the Avengers anymore. This is Doom walking in, already holding a gun pointed straight at Xavier's side of the roster. Did he build these himself? Did he pull them out of some version of the X-Men's world that didn't survive whatever incursion wrecked it? Either answer is scary. However, he got them. This tells you Doom isn't fighting heroes. He's fighting with their worst fears already loaded in his hand. Okay, detail hunting over. This part's the one that actually matters. Go back to that Avengers Tower shot. 3 connected globes just sitting there in the background. Comic readers clocked this immediately. It's a direct mirror of the incursion panels from the comics where Earth 616, Earth 828, and the X-Men's whole universe literally crash into each other and start wiping each other out. That's not decoration. That's Marvel telling you the actual plot of this movie in one background prop. Now, incursions in the comics are what eventually forces the creation of Battleworld, and it leads straight into Secret Wars, which we already know is coming in 2027. This one shot might honestly be the clearest confirmation yet of how Doomsday actually connects to the finale. It also explains why the X-Men and the Fantastic Four are suddenly sharing screen time with the Avengers. They're not just teaming up for fun. Their entire universes are literally crashing into ours. And you can already see it starting. People have wanted an X-Men versus Avengers movie for over a decade, and this trailer gives us our first real taste of it happening inside the X-Mansion. Gambit straight up throwing down with Shang-Chi, and it's not a friendly spar. It's a real fight between two teams that don't trust each other yet, which tells you this isn't going to be everybody teaming up right away against Doom like Infinity War did. There's real friction here first. And one more confirmed thing before we move on. Letitia Wright told Entertainment Weekly at Comic-Con that Doomsday shows Shuri fully in this position as Black Panther 4 years after Wakanda Forever, having grown into that whole leadership lineage from Ramonda and T'Challa. This isn't just legacy characters showing up for a cameo. Everybody's grown since we last saw them. And I did a short on this next part, if you want to go check it out, about kind of who is Steve Rogers. Steve Rogers reunites with Thor and calls Mjolnir to his hand, except that Steve's got long hair, a full beard, no costume. This is not the Steve who went back to go dance with Peggy. So who is this guy? All right, theory one, and you've probably heard this one before, Hydra Cap, straight out of the Secret Empire comic run where Red Skull rewrote reality so Steve genuinely believed he'd always been Hydra, and that version still picked up the hammer. Here's the catch that most people are skipping, though. In the comics, that only worked because Mjolnir's enchantment had been secretly messed with by Madame Hydra. It wasn't really testing worthiness in that moment. It was rigged. So if the movie's going to be a clean gotcha right there, that's shaky continuity to build on. Theory 2, Mystique. Rebecca Romaine's confirmed to be back. We saw her in the trailer. Doom's set up as both a scientist and a sorcerer in this thing. And Thor's reaction kind of reads like he's looking at a total stranger. But, I mean, shapeshifters infiltrating the Avengers by wearing Steve's exact face, that's a whole lot of effort for a trick nobody actually needs. Theory number 3, and this is the one that actually I'm starting to lean towards now after hearing Anthony Mackie talking at Comic-Con, Nomad. Watch the trailer again. Steve is never once called Captain America, not by Thor, not in any line of dialogue, nothing. And Sam Wilson's still shown carrying the shield, so the mantle hasn't moved. That's not an accident. Comic Book Resource actually named the theory everybody's skipping over. Steve Rogers is Nomad, the identity he takes on in the comics after he loses faith in the government during Secret Empire. He doesn't get corrupted. He doesn't get replaced. He just walks away from the name and the shield while still completely staying himself. No deception, no impersonation. Just a guy who's done being a symbol. Chris Evans himself also told Entertainment Weekly at Comic-Con that right after Endgame wrapped in 2018, Kevin Feige and Lou D'Esposito took him to dinner and told him straight up they wanted to keep him doing movies with Steve Rogers as Nomad. This is not a comic reader fan theory anymore. That is Marvel's actual internal plan, straight from the guy who lived it. Evans said no at the time, called himself precious about the role, wanted to preserve what Endgame had built, but over the next 8 years, he says he heard at least a dozen pitches, and Nomad kept coming up every time as the direction for Steve. What finally got him to say yes wasn't even a script. It was hearing Downey was circling the project. Nomad wasn't a guess. That was the plan the whole time. So if Nomad explains who this guy is, we still haven't answered the scarier question. Why does a villain from a completely different universe even know this man exists in the first place? There's a rumor that answers that, and there's also multiple reports saying this movie flips one of Doom's oldest comic relationships completely. In the comics, Doom's whole existence revolves around one thing, destroying Reed Richards. But reports on Doomsday say the movie shows Doom with basically zero interest in Reed. And I gotta be upfront, Marvel hasn't confirmed this, so treat this as a strong rumor, not as a settled fact. But if this is true, it's not just a comic accuracy swap, it's a real callback, because Evans and Downey have literally done this dance before. Steve and Tony were the emotional core of this whole franchise for a decade. They broke apart completely in Civil War over something that they couldn't agree on. Then they came back together to save reality in Endgame. Now Marvel's putting these two actors back in the ring, except this time one of them isn't wearing the hero mask anymore. And at Comic-Con, Downey finally addressed the question that's been hanging over this whole movie. Why does Doom look exactly like Tony Stark? And his answer is more about theme than anything literal. He told Entertainment Weekly, there's the science thing, and they're considered pretty brilliant guys, but Tony had the trauma that turned him into a hero, and Doom's got the exact opposite, to where it takes the prowess of all these folks to go up against him. And now we actually know what that trauma is. The Hall H footage confirms Doom lost his family, a mother and a child, and that loss is what broke him into the villain we're about to see. Sue Storm knew him personally before all that happened. In the footage, she says, he used to be different, he used to be kind. He used to be caring. Everything he loved was taken away from him. I knew he was lost, and I did not realize that he was broken. And when Reed straight up asks him, Victor, did you do it? Doom looks at him and he says, all of you have lived stolen lives. You refuse to give them back. That is not generic villain talk. That's grief turned into an accusation. But Downey still didn't confirm anything. Everything was kind of like, maybe, I can't really talk about it. No multiversal link, no actual explanation for why he looks like Tony at all. And he's never once said the words, I'm not playing a Stark variant. What he actually said, going back to an older interview, is that Fahey pitched him on Victor Von Doom by name, telling him to get Victor Von Doom right. A bunch of outlets read that as strong evidence against the variant theory, but I gotta say, that's their interpretation. That's not Downey directly denying it. So the resemblance isn't really the connection here anyway. The connection is that the exact same kind of pain built one of these guys into a hero and completely destroyed the other one. There's tension sitting right next to that, too. At Comic-Con, Pedro Pascal got asked about Reed's relationship to what Doom becomes, and he said Reed doesn't take any responsibility for it at all. Intellectuals understand that we're all responsible for ourselves, Pedro said. On paper, that's a fair enough philosophy, but in practice, that's a massive departure from the comics, where Doom's entire hatred of Reed exists because Reed's tied to the accident that scarred him, whether he's actually at fault or not. So if this Reed genuinely feels zero responsibility, that's either a really mature character choice or it's a red flag that this movie's flattening one of the richest villain dynamics in comics into a basic good guy versus bad guy thing. Sue clearly still feels the history and the grief here. If Reed just shrugs it off completely, that's real tension worth watching for. So another question that people have been asking, how does Doom even find Steve in the first place? Marvel hasn't confirmed a single word of what I'm about to go through, but it's the most detailed answer that I can think of right now. So let's go through this. I want to ground this in something that's actually on screen first, not a rumor. Look at all the curtains behind Loki in the trailer. They match the house where Steve and Peggy danced at the end of Endgame. There's also a TVA card on screen with the Yggdrasil tree on the back. The detail that most breakdowns that I'm seeing are actually getting wrong, the way it's edited makes it look like Loki's the one holding that card. But you look closer, there's a wedding band on his hand. That's not Loki's hand, that's Steve's, which means Steve himself is holding a TVA identification, not just a visit from somebody who has it. And the tree on that card ties this whole scene to the post-Loki Season 2 timeline, where Loki's sitting on the multiversal throne holding reality together instead of just walking around physically, which is probably why this is more of a projection than Loki actually standing in that room. Loki reaching out to Steve is confirmed right there in the footage. What happens after that visit, though, that's where I think some of the leaks are taking over. The rumor going around right now says that Loki warned Steve that his presence in the past is destabilizing the timeline bad enough to risk an incursion. So instead of pruning him, Loki moves Steve and his family to a whole different universe, Earth 828, the Fantastic Four's world, where he can live out a peaceful life without putting everyone else in danger. Reports say that Steve lives there for something like 10 years before he gets pulled back into all this. That's the leak's explanation for the long hair, the beard, the street clothes, all of that. And apparently, according to that same reporting, that's also how Doom crosses paths with him at all. Doom's not hunting Steve directly. He's investigating incursions threatening his own reality. And that search is supposedly what leads him right to Roger's family hiding in plain sight. There's even a heavier layer under all that, still totally unconfirmed, tying Doom's whole vendetta to losing his own family in the exact type of incursion Steve's presence in the past might have caused. Again, none of this is coming from Marvel. This is a scooper reporting, and scoopers get things wrong all the time. But even if part of that still holds up, it turns Doom's whole motivation personal instead of just villain of the week stuff. If this is true, Doom isn't working off some villain checklist. He's hunting the guy he blames for erasing his family. And Steve Rogers doesn't even know he's the reason.